He was 9 feet of nightmare, bronze from head to foot, a spear like a tree trunk, a voice that shook the valley floor. For 40 days, he walked out into no man's land and screamed the same challenge, and for 40 days, an entire army stood frozen, too terrified to answer. Then one afternoon, a boy who wasn't even supposed to be on the battlefield picked up 5 stones from a dry riverbed. He had no armor, no sword, no military training, and by sundown, the giant would be dead and an empire's fear would die with him. This is the story of the smallest weapon ever used to win the biggest war. Stay until the end, because what felled Goliath wasn't muscle. It was something far more dangerous. One line that captures it all. The battle was never about the size of the giant. It was about the size of the God he stood against. The land of Israel, roughly 1,000 years before Christ. 2 armies face each other across a valley near Soko. In the territory of Judah, the Israelites camped on one ridge, the Philistines on the other, with a ravine of dry earth and dead silence stretched between them like a held breath. Neither side moves. Neither side dares. And then, from the Philistine line, the ground itself seems to tremble. He steps forward, and there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath, of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. 1 Samuel 17 verse 4. 6 cubits and a span over 9 feet of bronze and muscle. Scripture itself pauses here, almost reverently cataloging the horror. A helmet of bronze, a coat of mail weighing 5,000 shekels, bronze armor on his legs, a spear like a weaver's beam, its iron head alone weighing 600 shekels. He doesn't walk onto that battlefield. He occupies it, and then he opens his mouth. Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. 1 Samuel 17 verse 8. A challenge. Single combat. Winner takes all, the loser's nation becomes the slave of the other. It's a calculated psychological weapon, and it works exactly as intended. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. 1 Samuel 17 verse 11. Picture it. Thousands of soldiers, trained men with swords on their hips and shields on their arms, and not one of them moves. For 40 mornings and 40 evenings, Goliath returns to that same spot in the valley and roars the same challenge into the silence. 40 sunrises of humiliation, 40 sunsets of paralysis. Would you have stepped forward? Would you have stayed silent? 3 words: afraid, frozen, silent. While an army trembles in a valley, somewhere in Bethlehem, a much smaller story is unfolding, one that heaven has been writing for years, hidden behind the simple rhythms of an ordinary life. David is the youngest of 8 brothers, the one left behind to watch sheep while his brothers wear armor and carry swords. He's not a soldier. He's barely considered a man. But he spent his days alone in the hills, learning something the army camp never taught its warriors: how to fight when no one is watching, how to trust God when there's no applause, no audience, nothing but a sling, a flock, and the silence of open fields. His father Jesse sends him on an errand, bread and cheese for his brothers, a check on how the war is going. David arrives at the camp at the exact moment Goliath steps out for his 40th time, and something in David doesn't freeze. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17 verse 32. Saul looks at this boy, too young, too small, no armor, no sword, and the doubt in the king's eyes is almost audible. "Thou art not able to go against this Philistine, for thou art but a youth." 1 Samuel 17 verse 33. But David doesn't argue from confidence in himself. He argues from memory, from every lion and bear he fought protecting his father's sheep, when no human eye was watching and only God saw the danger he walked into. "Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. The Lord delivered me out of the paw of the lion, and out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17 verses 34 to 37. This is the hidden hand of God in the story, not a voice from the sky, not fire from heaven, but years of quiet preparation in a field nobody was watching. Every wolf David fought alone. Every night he guarded sheep in the dark. None of it looked like destiny. All of it was. Could the thing you're doing in obscurity right now, the thing nobody applauds, be God training you for the giant you haven't met yet? 3 words: unseen, faithful, ready. Saul, desperate and out of options, does something almost tender. He tries to dress David in his own armor. His helmet, his coat of mail.
It's so
his sword.
heavy, Saul.
David puts it on.
Hold still.
And it's
I'll
wrong.
adjust it.
All wrong.
Ugh, thanks.
Too heavy. Too foreign.
It's so
built for
heavy,
another
Saul.
man's battles,
Hold still.
not his.
I'll adjust
and
it.
David said unto
Ugh,
Saul,
thanks.
I cannot go with these.
It's so
for I have
heavy,
not
Saul.
proved them.
Hold still.
And David put
I'll
them
adjust
off
it.
1
Ugh,
Samuel
thanks.
17, verse 39. He takes them off. This is one of the most overlooked moments in the entire story, and one of the most important. David doesn't reject Saul's armor out of pride. He rejects it because victory was never going to come from imitating someone else's weapons. It would come from walking in exactly what God had already equipped him with. He picks up his staff. He chooses 5 smooth stones from the brook. He takes the sling he's used 1,000 times on lions and wolves and thieves in the dark hills of Bethlehem. That's it. That's the entire arsenal. 3 words: stripped, honest, unarmed. If this story moves you, like, share, and subscribe to The Sacred Mind and walk with us through the greatest stories ever told. David walks down into the ravine. Above him on both ridges, 2 armies watch in disbelieving silence. Goliath sees him coming, and the giant's reaction isn't fear. It's laughter. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth. 1 Samuel 17, verse 42. Goliath's mockery cracks through the valley like a second weapon. Asterisk, am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? He curses David by his gods. He promises to feed his corpse to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. And David, small, unarmored, alone answers with words that have echoed through 3,000 years of human history. Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, whom thou hast defied, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Asterisk, 1 Samuel 17, verses 45 and 46. This isn't bravado. This is theology spoken on a battlefield. David names the real war beneath the visible one. It was never bronze against flesh. It was the living God against everything that mocks him. Goliath begins to move forward, the ground shaking under 9 feet of armored fury. David runs toward him. He reaches into his bag. 1 stone. The sling whirls once, twice, and releases. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his. The army that had stood paralyzed for 40 days suddenly finds its courage and surges down into the valley in pursuit. The same fear that gripped Israel had, just minutes earlier, gripped the Philistines too. Fear is contagious, but so, it turns out, is faith. One person's courage broke the spell over an entire nation. This is the moment the narration must pause and acknowledge what Scripture leaves unspoken. There's no burning bush here, no voice splitting the clouds. God's hand moves through a sling, a stone, and a shepherd's steady aim. Sometimes heaven doesn't shout. Sometimes it simply guides a stone exactly where it needs to go. 3 words: defeated, liberated, changed. This story has lived in human hearts for 3,000 years, and it isn't because of a clever military upset. It's because every person watching this has stood, at some point, in their own valley staring across at their own giant. The first lesson, your giant is never too big for God, but it might be too big for you. That gap is exactly where faith lives. The second lesson, preparation happens in private. David's victory in public was forged in years of obscurity nobody saw. Whatever quiet, unglamorous faithfulness you're practicing right now, it matters more than you know. You don't need someone else's armor. Asterisk, God doesn't ask you to fight your battle the way somebody else fought theirs. He equips you with exactly what you need for exactly what you face. Courage is contagious, but so is fear. Asterisk, what you choose to do in your valley will ripple further than you can see. And there's a deeper echo here, one that points forward 1,000 years to another unlikely figure who walked into impossible odds without armor and without the world's approval. A carpenter's son, mocked, underestimated, surrounded by enemies who thought size and power would always win. Jesus didn't carry a sword either. He carried obedience to the Father, and that was enough to defeat an enemy far older and far more terrifying than Goliath ever was. So here's the challenge. What giant has been shouting across your valley for 40 days? What fear has frozen your whole camp? You may not have armor. You may not feel ready. But you were never asked to fight with someone else's weapons. You were only asked to walk down into the valley with what God already gave you and trust Him with the aim. A final thought to carry with you. Goliath fell not because David was strong, but because David was small enough to need God. And that has always been exactly strong enough. Asterisk. If this journey stirred your heart, follow the sacred mind. Share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe so these stories of faith and courage continue to reach the world.